My daughter-in-law placed a guest name card in front of me at a dinner hosted inside my own house, and for a moment I thought my eyes had betrayed me. I stood in the dining room with my purse still hanging from my wrist, looking down at the small folded card beside the salad plate. Guest. Margaret Ellis. The handwriting was not mine. The table was mine. The china was mine. The house was mine. But somehow, on Daniel's 43rd birthday, I had become someone to be seated instead of someone to be asked. Brittany glided past me in a pale blue dress, her blonde hair pinned neatly behind one ear, carrying herself with the bright confidence of a woman who had already decided where everyone belonged. "Oh, Margaret, you found your seat," she said, smiling as if nothing about it should have hurt. I made place cards so the caterers would not get confused. The caterers. In my dining room. Moving around the table Robert and I bought in 1986 after saving for nearly 8 months. I looked toward the kitchen and saw 2 young women in black aprons arranging trays on my counter. One of them asked Brittany where to put the serving spoons, and Brittany answered without hesitation. Top drawer to the left of the stove. She knew because she had opened every drawer in my kitchen enough times to stop asking. I had agreed to host Daniel's birthday dinner because he said it would be easier than making me drive across Madison after dark. That was how he phrased it, like kindness. "Mom, why do you not let us handle everything this year?" he had said. "You can just relax." I should have noticed the word us. I should have noticed that relaxing meant stepping aside while Brittany took possession of the rooms I had spent 42 years filling with birthdays, holidays, snow days, school projects, and quiet Sunday breakfasts with Robert reading the paper beside me. Instead, I pressed my good navy dress, polished the silver candlesticks, and told myself it was nice that someone wanted to help. At 71, you learn that loneliness can make you generous with excuses. Daniel appeared from the hallway, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. He had Robert's eyes, which made it harder to be angry with him and easier to be disappointed. "Hey, Mom," he said, kissing my cheek quickly. "Looks great in here, does it not?" I waited for him to notice the card. He did. His eyes flicked down to it, then away. A small movement. Almost nothing. But a lifetime of motherhood teaches you to read almost nothing. Brittany stepped between us before silence could become a question. "I put you at the end, Margaret, so you will not have to get up and down. Everyone can bring things to you." She said it sweetly. That was her talent. She could make removal sound like care. I looked at the chair she had chosen for me, farthest from the kitchen, farthest from the head of the table, farthest from the spot where Robert used to sit with one hand resting beside his water glass. At that end I would not be serving. I would not be directing. I would not be asked where the extra napkins were or which wine glasses to use. I would be present but not necessary. "I usually sit there," I said, nodding toward the head of the table. Brittany's smile did not move, but her eyes sharpened. "I know. But Daniel should be the center tonight. It is his birthday." "Robert always sat there on Daniel's birthday," I said. "And after Robert passed, I did." Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, it is just a seat. Just a seat. People always say that when the thing being taken does not belong to them." I placed my purse on the sideboard and touched the back of the chair with the guest card in front of it. The paper felt smooth beneath my fingers, expensive, carefully chosen. Brittany had not made a mistake. She had made a point. Around us, guests began arriving. Brittany greeted them at my front door. My front door. She took coats and directed people toward the living room. She told my sister-in-law that the downstairs bathroom was available. She introduced me to one of Daniel's co-workers as Daniel's mother, not as the woman who owned the house they were standing in. Each little correction landed quietly, one after another. A spoon against glass. A door closing softly. A picture frame turned face down. When dinner began, Brittany raised her glass and thanked everyone for coming to our little family celebration. Our. Not mine. Not Margaret's. Not Robert's house. I sat at the end of the table beneath the soft glow of the chandelier. Robert had installed himself one winter weekend when snow kept us indoors. I watched Brittany laugh in my kitchen, move through my rooms and decide the rhythm of my home. Daniel smiled when others smiled. He did not look at me for long. Halfway through the meal, I noticed the mantel in the living room beyond the dining room doorway. My wedding photo was gone. In its place stood a tall white ceramic vase I had never bought. That was when I understood the name card was not the beginning. It was the announcement. Brittany had not seated me as a guest by accident. She had arranged the whole house as if I already was one. After the last guest left, the house did not feel quiet. It felt corrected by someone else's hand. The dining room chairs were pushed in at angles I would not have chosen. The silver candlesticks had been moved from the center of the table to the sideboard, where they looked decorative instead of familiar. The caterers had wiped the kitchen counter so clean that even the small coffee ring near the sink was gone, the one Robert used to make every morning because he always set his mug down too hard. Brittany called it spotless, called it erased. I stood in the living room beneath the mantel and looked at the white ceramic vase that had replaced my wedding photograph. It was tall, smooth, and empty, the kind of thing people buy when they want a room to look staged instead of lived in. My photograph was not in the drawer below. It was not on the bookshelf. It was not behind the clock. I found it 20 minutes later in the laundry room, wrapped in an old dish towel and placed inside a cardboard box with 3 framed pictures of Daniel as a boy, Robert's brass desk clock, and the little ceramic robin Emma painted for me in 2nd grade. On the side of the box, Brittany had written "Donate" in black marker. Donate. My wedding day. My son's childhood. My granddaughter's crooked red bird. I sat on the closed lid of the washing machine and held the photograph in both hands. Robert was standing beside me in his gray suit, one arm around my waist, smiling like he could not believe his luck. I was 28 in that picture, wearing a dress my mother helped me hem the night before the ceremony because we could not afford alterations. We looked young and certain. We looked like people who believed home would always recognize them. I carried the photograph back to the living room and placed it on the mantel where it belonged. Then I found the brass clock and set it in the hallway, where its slow ticking filled the space like a heartbeat returning. The next morning, Brittany arrived without calling. She let herself in through the garage while I was making toast, walked into my kitchen holding a travel mug, and stopped when she saw the wedding photo back on the mantel. Her expression flickered, then smoothed. "Oh," she said. "You found that box." I buttered my toast slowly. It was labeled "Donate." She gave a light laugh, the kind that asks everyone in the room to agree before the joke is clear. I was sorting clutter. "You have so many sentimental things, Margaret. It makes the house feel heavy." "That photograph is not clutter." "Of course not," she said quickly. "I just thought maybe it was time to freshen the room. Daniel worries that being surrounded by old memories keeps you stuck." "Daniel worries." She used his name the way some people use a shield. I looked at her over the rim of my coffee cup. "Did Daniel ask you to remove my wedding photograph?" She paused. "Only a second." "Enough. We both want the house to feel welcoming." "Welcoming to whom?" Her smile thinned. "To everyone." That afternoon, I walked through my own rooms like a stranger trying to learn what had been taken. The quilt Robert's mother made was gone from the guest room bed and folded inside a plastic bin in the basement. My blue china, the one I used every Thanksgiving, had been packed in newspaper and stacked near the furnace. The lace curtains in the front sitting room had been replaced with plain beige panels. Robert's reading chair, the one with worn arms and a cushion shaped by 20 years of his body, had been moved into the basement storage area beside paint cans and Christmas wreaths. When I asked Daniel about it later, he sighed before I finished the sentence. "Mom, Brittany is just trying to modernize the place." Modernize. As if love had an expiration date. As if a home became more valuable when the people who built it disappeared from view. I wanted to tell him that every object she moved had a history. I wanted to remind him that his father fell asleep in that chair waiting for him to come home after prom. I wanted to ask when he had stopped hearing me as his mother and started hearing me as an inconvenience. Instead I said, "This is still my house." There was a pause on the line. Then Daniel said softly, "Nobody said it was not. But people do not have to say a thing when they are already acting on it." That evening I went to pull my car into the garage and found the keypad would not accept my code. I tried again, then again, for numbers I had used for 14 years. Nothing. A red light blinked back at me like a small warning. I stood in the cold Madison dusk with my groceries in one hand and my keys in the other, looking at the garage door Robert had painted twice because Wisconsin winters were hard on wood. When Brittany answered my call, she sounded surprised that I was upset. "Oh, Daniel changed that last week," she said. The old code was too obvious. No one told me. I thought he did. She always thought someone else had done the decent thing. I carried the groceries through the front door one bag at a time, my fingers stiff from the cold. Inside, the brass clock ticked in the hallway. The wedding photo watched from the mantel. The house was trying to remember itself. So was I. By the end of that week, I began to understand that Brittany did not need to raise her voice to take over a room. She only had to make everyone believe she was the reasonable one. At Sunday lunch after church, my sister-in-law asked why I had seemed tense at Daniel's birthday dinner. Before I could answer, Brittany reached across the table and touched my hand as if comforting me. "Margaret has been having a hard time with changes around the house," she said softly. "We are all trying to be patient." Patient. The word sat between us like a verdict. I looked at Daniel. He stirred cream into his coffee and said nothing. Later, I learned she had been saying versions of that sentence for months. Margaret gets overwhelmed. Margaret forgets what she agreed to. Margaret becomes emotional when anyone tries to help. It was clever because it made every protest sound like proof. If I said she moved my wedding photo, I was sentimental. If I said she packed Robert's chair into the basement, I was stuck in the past. If I said the garage code had been changed without telling me, I was confused. Brittany did not erase me by force. She trained people to doubt me one small story at a time. The house became the center of it all. She started planning meals in my kitchen without asking what I wanted. She kept a basket of her own mail on my side counter, as if she lived there part-time. She brought over scented candles I did not like and placed them in rooms where Robert's pipe tobacco used to linger faintly in the wood. She changed the guest towels, moved the spare blankets, rearranged the pantry, and once corrected me in front of Emma when I said the Christmas dishes were in the upper cabinet. "They are in the lower one now," Brittany said brightly. "Remember, Margaret?" Emma looked at me with the worried eyes children get when adults make aging sound like a mistake. I smiled and said, "Of course." But I did not remember because I had not moved them. She had. The worst part was not the objects. It was the way Daniel accepted each change as if the women in his life were simply negotiating decorating choices, not territory. When I told him I felt like decisions were being made over my head, he rubbed his forehead and said, "Mom, can we not turn everything into a conflict?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I had spent my entire life preventing conflict for his comfort. I swallowed the answer I wanted to give him and went home with the quiet taste of humiliation in my mouth. 2 days later, Helen Brooks called. Helen lived next door in a green ranch house with white shutters and a bird feeder that attracted more squirrels than birds. She had known me since Daniel was in middle school, and Robert still mowed both our lawns after snowmelt because he said a neighbor should not have to ask twice. "Margaret," Helen said, lowering her voice, "are you selling the house?" I was standing in the laundry room folding towels. One slipped from my hands. "No. Why would you ask that?" There was a pause. "Because a woman was there yesterday with Brittany. Not family. Professional looking. She had a measuring tape and one of those tablets. They were taking pictures of your front sitting room through the window after Brittany let her in." My throat went dry. "What time?" "A little after 2. Your car was gone, so I assumed you had an appointment." I had been at the dentist. Brittany knew because Daniel had mentioned it when he offered to pick up my prescription afterward and then forgot. Helen continued carefully. "They walked around the backyard too. I heard Brittany say the old landscaping could be charming if it was cleaned up. The woman mentioned staging." Staging. The word made the whole week click into place. The missing photo. The beige curtains. The box china. The white vase. The guest card. She was not making my house fresh. She was making it sellable. I thanked Helen and hung up, but I did not move for a long time. The dryer buzzed behind me. The brass clock ticked down the hall. Outside, the late afternoon light spread across the floor. Robert had refinished with his own hands. I walked to the mantel and looked at our wedding photo. For once, I did not feel only sadness. I felt something colder and steadier. Brittany had spent months making me look unreasonable. Now I understood why. A reasonable woman might be believed. A difficult old woman could be removed. That evening, I opened Robert's old desk in the den and pulled out the folder marked estate papers. My hands were calm when I set it on the table. For years, I had trusted family to remember who I was. Now I needed paper to remind them. The next morning, Daniel called before breakfast. I was standing at Robert's desk with the estate folder open in front of me, trying to make sense of legal language that had once seemed unnecessary, because I believed family would never make me need it. His name appeared on my phone, and for one brief second I hoped Helen had been mistaken. I hoped Daniel was calling to explain that Brittany had overstepped, that he was sorry, that no one had meant to make me feel like a stranger under my own roof. Instead he said, "Mom, Brittany and I want to come by tonight. We need to talk about some practical things." Practical. That word had become a warning bell. I looked down at Robert's signature on one of the documents, firm and slightly slanted, the way he always wrote when he wanted something done properly. "What kind of practical things?" I asked. Daniel sighed, not angrily but tiredly, as if my question had already made the conversation harder. "Just planning. Your comfort. The house. You know." I did know. That was the problem. They arrived at 6 with a blueberry pie from the bakery on Monroe Street, the one Robert used to stop at after his cardiology appointments because he said bad news needed butter and sugar to soften it. Brittany carried the pie like an offering. Daniel carried a folder. I noticed that first. Not his face. Not his coat. The folder. It was light gray with a white label, neat enough to have been prepared by someone who expected the evening to go her way. Brittany kissed the air near my cheek and said, "Margaret, you look tired. Have you been resting?" I stepped aside and let them in. "I have been reading." Her smile paused. "Reading? Old papers." Daniel looked at the folder on his hands, then away. We sat at the kitchen table because I refused to let them turn my living room into another stage. Brittany sliced the pie without asking where the dessert plates were. She knew. Of course she knew. She placed a piece in front of me, though I had not said I wanted any. "We have been thinking," she began, folding her hands with careful sweetness, "and we really believe you deserve a life with less stress." I looked at Daniel. "Is that what you believe?" He cleared his throat. "Mom, this place is a lot. The stairs, the snow, the upkeep. Wisconsin winters are not getting easier. I have lived through 71 of them." Brittany gave a soft laugh. "Exactly. That is why you should not have to prove anything anymore." She reached into her purse and pulled out a glossy brochure. Lakeview Commons Senior Living. 35 miles away, outside Sun Prairie. On the cover, 2 smiling women in pastel sweaters walked beside a pond that looked too blue to be real. Brittany tapped the page with one polished fingernail. "They have a small lake, gentle yoga, meals included, shuttle service to medical appointments, even a book club. It is beautiful. We toured it last week." I let the word sit for a moment. "You toured it?" "For you," she said quickly. "Just to save you the trouble." There it was again. Help that moved ahead of permission. Daniel shifted in his chair. "Mom, nobody is forcing anything. We just want you to consider it." "And my house?" I asked. Brittany looked at Daniel, and Daniel opened the gray folder. He slid several pages toward me. "This would just let me help with paperwork," he said. "Bills, insurance, maintenance things. Nothing dramatic." I picked up the top page. The first paragraph was soft, full of words like support, transition, and family assistance. The second page was not soft at all. Financial authority, real property management, access to accounts, permission to act on my behalf. The phrases seemed to rise from the paper one at a time, each one colder than the last. I looked at my son. "Did you read this?" His face colored. "Brittany explained it." Brittany leaned forward. "It is standard, Margaret. You should not have to handle everything alone." I did not say I was alone. Her smile tightened. "You live alone. That is not the same thing." For the first time, Daniel looked directly at me and I saw conflict there. Not courage. Not yet. But conflict. Brittany saw it too and moved quickly. "This is exactly why we wanted to talk calmly. You hear help as criticism. We are only trying to protect you from a crisis." I placed the papers back on the table, aligning the edges carefully. My hands did not shake. "I will not sign anything tonight." The room changed. Not loudly. Just enough. Brittany's shoulders stiffened. Daniel looked down at the pie he had not touched. "Mom," he said, You can take a few days. Brittany turned to him with a flash of irritation, then smoothed it away before facing me again. Of course. Read it if you need to. But please do not let old fears make this harder than it has to be. Old fears. I almost smiled. She thought fear was what made me pause. She did not understand that fear had left me sometime between the guest card and Helen's phone call. What remained was attention. I walked them to the door with the same manners I had taught Daniel as a boy. Brittany reminded me to keep an open mind. Daniel squeezed my shoulder and said he loved me, too softly for his wife to hear. After their car pulled away, I locked the door and returned to the kitchen table. The blueberry pie sat untouched beside the gray folder. I took a photograph of every page. Then I opened Robert's address book and found the number for Alan Porter, the estate attorney we had trusted for 30 years. When his voicemail answered, I spoke clearly. Mr. Porter, this is Margaret Ellis. I need you to review documents my son and daughter-in-law brought me tonight. I think they are trying to turn help into control. Alan Porter called back at 7:40 the next morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the gray folder in front of me, a cup of coffee untouched beside it, and the blueberry pie still in the box as if sweetness could disguise what had been placed next to it. Alan's voice was older than I remembered, but steady. He had handled our first will when Robert and I still had a mortgage, a station wagon, and a son who believed the world ended if he missed Saturday cartoons. Margaret, he said, I looked at the photographs you sent. I need you to bring the original papers to my office today if you can. I looked down at the pages. Are they what they said they were? There was a pause. Not long. Long enough. They are more than help with paperwork. His office sat in a low brick building near the Capitol Square, with a view of bare maple trees and people hurrying past in winter coats. I had not been there since Robert died. When Alan walked me through signatures while I nodded at words I barely understood because grief had made everything sound far away. This time every word mattered. Alan met me in the reception area himself. He was in his late 70s, tall and narrow, with silver eyebrows and a careful way of moving, as if he had learned not to waste gestures. He took the gray folder from me with both hands. Did you sign anything? No, good. We sat in his office while he read. I watched his face more than the documents. Lawyers are trained not to show much, but after 30 years of knowing a family, even a careful man has limits. His mouth tightened at the second page. His eyes stopped on the third. When he finished, he removed his glasses and set them on the desk. This is a broad, durable power of attorney. If signed, it would allow Daniel to act for you in financial matters, insurance matters, property management, and communications with banks or agencies. The language is not limited to paying a few bills. I folded my hands in my lap. Could they use it to move me out? Not directly by itself, but it would make it easier to create pressure, manage access, redirect information, and make decisions around you instead of with you. Around you. That was exactly how it felt. Alan opened another file, older and thicker, with Robert Ellis printed on the tab. Seeing my husband's name there so formal and black and final made my chest ache. Alan rested one hand on the folder before opening it. Robert asked me to prepare something specific before he passed. He did not want to alarm you, and he hoped it would never matter. I looked at him. What did he see? Alan's expression softened. Enough to worry. He noticed Daniel was becoming passive in family decisions. He noticed Brittany speaking for him and sometimes for you. He said once that your house had started to feel like a place where other people were making plans. I turned my face toward the window. Outside, a woman crossed the street holding a child's mitten in one hand. The world kept doing ordinary things while mine rearranged itself. He never told me. He wanted to protect your peace while he was alive and protect your rights after he was gone. Alan opened the file and showed me the trust. The Ellis Residence Trust. Our house. My house. Robert had placed it there 3 years before his death. I had signed papers, yes, but I had been focused on his appointments, his medication schedule, the way his hands became thinner each month. I trusted him. I did not study the shield he was building because I did not yet know there would be arrows. Alan read the key part aloud in plain English. I had lifetime occupancy. No one could force me to leave. No sale, transfer, or relocation plan could move forward without my informed written consent and legal review. Then he turned another page. There is a protective clause. If Daniel, his spouse, or anyone acting on their behalf attempts to pressure you into surrendering control of the residence, misrepresent your consent, or interfere with your occupancy rights, Daniel's future interest in the trust can be suspended pending review. I sat very still. I did not feel victorious. I felt married again for one painful second, as if Robert had reached across the years and placed his hand over mine. He knew, I whispered. Alan nodded. He suspected. Then his assistant knocked and brought in another printed packet. Alan read the top sheet and his face changed in that small legal way that means something serious has become documented. I also searched recent communications. Brittany emailed a local agent named Caroline Meyer last week. He slid the paper toward me. One sentence seemed to lift itself from the page. The current occupant is emotionally attached but manageable. Current occupant. Manageable. Not widow. Not mother. Not owner. I put the page down carefully. She was practicing my disappearance. Ellen leaned back. Now we make sure she does it in front of witnesses. For the next 2 days, I let Brittany believe I was hesitating because I was confused. That was easier for her to understand than strategy. She sent polite messages every few hours, each one wrapped in concern and sharpened underneath. Have you had time to look over the paperwork? Daniel is worried. Lakeview Commons only has a few openings left. We do not want you to miss a good opportunity because this feels emotional. I read every message and answered only once. I am still reviewing everything. The reply was plain enough to bore her. That was the point. On Thursday evening, Daniel called and said Brittany wanted to have a family discussion at my house on Saturday afternoon. Just to make sure everyone feels heard, he said. I was standing in the hallway beneath Robert's brass clock, watching the second hand move with the steady patience of something that had survived longer than most people's promises. Who is everyone? I asked. Daniel hesitated. Just us. Maybe Aunt Linda. Brittany thought it might help if Caroline came too, to answer questions about the property market. And someone from Lakeview Commons, just for information. I closed my eyes, not because I was surprised, because I was tired of hearing pressure introduced as support. So a real estate agent and a senior living consultant are coming to my house to help me feel heard. He exhaled. Mom, please do not say it like that. How should I say it? He did not answer. That silence told me he knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Still, knowing is not courage. I called Alan as soon as we hung up. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "Let them come. Do not sign anything. Do not argue. Let Brittany explain the plan in her own words. And you. I will be nearby. Helen too if she is willing." Helen was more than willing. When I called, she said, "I have been waiting for that woman to underestimate you." Saturday arrived bright and bitterly cold, with old snow along the driveway and sunlight flashing off the ice at the curb. I woke early, made my bed, and walked through each room slowly. I put my wedding photograph firmly back on the mantel. I placed Robert's brass clock in the hallway where it ticked with soft authority. I brought the blue china up from the basement and stacked it in the dining room cabinet, not for display but for memory. The house looked less staged and more honest. At 1:30, Brittany arrived with Daniel, Aunt Linda, Caroline Meyer, and a woman from Lakeview Commons named Ms. Watkins, who wore a red scarf and carried a folder full of smiling strangers. Brittany looked around the living room and noticed immediately the wedding photo, the clock, the china. Her mouth tightened before she remembered to smile. "Margaret," she said, "you have been busy." "It is my house," I said. "I know where things belong." Aunt Linda glanced at me, then at Brittany. Daniel took off his coat slowly and would not look at the mantel. Caroline set a tablet on the coffee table. Ms. Watkins sat near the window and opened her folder. Brittany stood in the center of the room like she was hosting a meeting in an office she had leased. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "We are here because Margaret has reached a point where the house may no longer be the healthiest place for her." I sat in Robert's chair. Not near it. In it. My hands rested calmly on the arms worn smooth by his years of reading there. Brittany continued, explaining the stairs, the winter maintenance, the so-called isolation, the emotional burden of keeping too many old things. She spoke gently, carefully, beautifully. Anyone who did not know better might have thought she loved me. Then Caroline turned her tablet toward the room and showed photographs of my front sitting room, my backyard, my porch, my kitchen. Pictures taken while I was at the dentist. With some staging, Caroline said, this property could do very well in the spring market. Aunt Linda stiffened. Margaret, you already agreed to sell? Before I could answer, Brittany said, she is close to accepting the transition. She just needs to feel supported. I looked at her. Supported or surrounded? The room went still. Daniel whispered, Mom. Brittany's smile finally cracked. This is exactly what I mean. Every practical step becomes a personal attack. We are trying to help you move forward, and you keep clinging to control like the house is still only yours. I tilted my head. Still. She realized the word too late. Her cheeks colored, but she pushed on. You know what I mean. This house affects Daniel too. It affects the whole family. You cannot expect everyone to keep treating it like a shrine because you refuse to let go. The old me might have defended myself. The old me might have explained what the house meant, what Robert built, what Daniel owed to the rooms that raised him. But I had learned something by then. People who are determined to take from you do not need more explanation. They need a witness. I looked toward the front window. Across the street, a dark sedan pulled to the curb. Alan Porter stepped out in his wool coat with his leather briefcase in one hand. Helen Brooks climbed out behind him, buttoning her green coat against the cold. Brittany was still talking when the doorbell rang. Daniel was closest to the hallway, but he did not move right away. He looked from Brittany to me, then toward the front door as the bell rang a second time. Brittany stopped mid-sentence with her hand still lifted. Her face caught between irritation and alarm. Were you expecting someone? She asked. I stood slowly from Robert's chair. Yes. That one word changed the room more than any argument could have. Daniel opened the door and Alan Porter stepped inside first, brushing a few cold drops of melted snow from his coat sleeve. Helen followed behind him, small and straight-backed, her green coat buttoned to her throat and her eyes clear behind her glasses. Alan carried his leather briefcase in one hand and a folder in the other. He looked around my living room, taking in Aunt Linda on the sofa, Caroline with her tablet, Ms. Watkins with the Lakeview Commons brochure, Daniel by the doorway, and Brittany standing in the middle of it all like an actress whose cue had suddenly changed. Good afternoon, Alan said. I am Alan Porter, Mrs. Ellis's attorney. Caroline looked down at her tablet. Ms. Watkins closed her folder halfway. Aunt Linda turned toward me with confusion written across her face. Brittany recovered first, or tried to. Margaret, she said lightly, I wish you had told us you invited legal counsel. This was supposed to be a family conversation. Alan removed his gloves with deliberate calm. It became a legal matter when documents were presented to my client for signature, and when her residence was discussed with a real estate agent without her informed written consent. The word client made Brittany blink. Not mother. Not elderly relative. Client. A woman with representation. A woman with rights. Daniel stepped forward. Mr. Porter, I think there may be some misunderstanding. Alan looked at him, not unkindly. That is why I am here. I sat back down in Robert's chair. I did not need to stand for the truth. Could stand on its own. Alan placed the folder on the coffee table beside Caroline's tablet and Brittany's printed agenda. First, let me clarify the status of this property. The house is held in the Ellis Residence Trust. Mrs. Margaret Ellis has lifetime occupancy rights. That means she has the legal right to live here for the rest of her life, unless she chooses otherwise through informed consent, reviewed by counsel. Aunt Linda made a soft sound. So she cannot be made to leave? Correct, Alan said. Brittany crossed her arms. No one is making her leave. We are offering options. Helen spoke then, her voice gentle but firm. Options usually do not require photographing a person's home while she is at the dentist. Brittany turned toward her. Excuse me. Helen did not flinch. I saw you bring Ms. Meyer here. I saw the pictures being taken. I heard the word staging through the open side window. Caroline's face flushed. I was told the family was preparing the property for a possible spring listing. Alan looked at her. Told by whom? Caroline hesitated. Her eyes moved to Brittany before she could stop them. The silence answered clearly enough. Daniel turned to his wife. Brittany, you said Caroline was only giving general advice. She was, Brittany said quickly. This is being twisted. Alan opened the folder and removed the printed email. Then perhaps you can explain this message. The current occupant is emotionally attached but manageable. No one breathed for a second. Aunt Linda looked at me with shock and then with something softer, almost shame. Daniel's face went pale. Brittany stared at the paper as if it had betrayed her by existing. That was taken out of context, she said. What context makes my mother an occupant? Daniel asked quietly. It was the first useful thing he had said in months. Brittany's mouth tightened. I was trying to protect our future. Whose future? I asked. My voice was low but everyone heard it. She looked at me then, and the polished version of her finally broke apart. You sit here with rooms full of things nobody can touch, acting like the whole family has to ask permission to breathe. Daniel is your only son. This house should help him too. There it was plain at last. Not concern. Not support. Claim. Alan placed another document on the table. The trust also contains a protective clause. If Daniel or his spouse attempts to pressure Mrs. Ellis into surrendering occupancy, misrepresenting consent, or transferring control of trust assets, Daniel's future interest may be suspended pending review. Daniel sat down as if his legs had lost their certainty. Dad did that. Alan nodded. Your father wanted your mother protected. I watched that sentence reach him. Robert had been gone 3 years, yet somehow his love had arrived exactly when my son's courage had failed. Brittany looked at Daniel, then at Alan, then at me. This is ridiculous. We were trying to help. I picked up the guest name card I had saved from Daniel's birthday dinner and placed it on the coffee table beside her email. No, I said. You were practicing for the day you thought I would be gone. The room stayed silent. Even the brass clock in the hallway seemed louder than before. Then Ms. Watkins quietly gathered her Lakeview Commons folder and stood. I think I should leave, she said. Caroline followed a moment later, avoiding everyone's eyes. Brittany did not stop them. For the first time since she entered my home, she had no room left to arrange. After Caroline and Ms. Watkins left, the front door closed with a softness that made the silence feel even heavier. Aunt Linda sat stiffly on the sofa, one hand pressed against her necklace. Daniel remained in the armchair with his elbows on his knees, staring at the guest card as if that small piece of paper had become a mirror. Brittany stood near the fireplace, her face pale with anger she could not safely spend. Alan did not rush to fill the quiet. He gathered the trust summary, the printed email, and the copy of the power of attorney into 3 neat stacks on the coffee table, each one more damaging than the last. Mrs. Ellis has instructed me to send formal notice, he said. No one is authorized to enter this property without her permission. No one is authorized to discuss sale, transfer, staging, or valuation of this property on her behalf. No one is authorized to present legal or financial documents to her without review through my office. Brittany laughed once, but there was no confidence in it. So now she needs a lawyer to talk to her own family? I looked at her calmly. No. I needed a lawyer because my own family stopped talking to me and started planning around me. Daniel flinched. Good. Some words should leave a mark. Not a wound, just a reminder. Ellen turned to him. Daniel, I want to be very clear. Your father's trust does not punish you for helping your mother. Protects her from being pressured. Those are very different things. Daniel lifted his head slowly. I did not understand what Brittany was doing. Aunt Linda spoke before I could. You understood enough to stay quiet. Her voice surprised all of us, perhaps even herself. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Margaret, I am sorry. I believed some of what Brittany said. I thought you were becoming difficult. I should have called you. I nodded because I had no room left inside me for comforting people through their guilt. You can call me now, I said. That was all I could offer. Brittany crossed the room and grabbed her purse from the chair. This is humiliating, she said. Yes, I answered. It is. She stopped, expecting more. I gave her nothing. That unsettled her more than anger would have. She turned to Daniel. Are you coming? He did not move. For the first time, he did not move. Brittany stared at him as if he had broken a rule neither of them had ever said aloud. Daniel. He looked up at her, and his voice came out rough. I need to talk to my mother. Her mouth opened. Closed. Then she walked out without another word, her heels striking the porch boards in quick, uneven steps. The car started a minute later and pulled away too fast for a quiet street. Daniel watched through the window until she was gone. Then he turned back to me. He looked younger suddenly, and not in the sweet way mothers remember. He looked like a man who had hidden behind someone else, so long he no longer knew where his own spine had gone. Mom, he said. I am sorry. I sat back in Robert's chair. For what? He blinked. For all of it. All of it is too easy. He swallowed. For letting her move your things. For not asking why the photo was gone. For letting her change the garage code. For not questioning the paperwork. For sitting there when you were treated like a guest in the house Dad built with you. His voice broke a little at the end, but he held my eyes. That mattered. Not enough to fix it, but enough to begin. And for believing it was easier to keep peace with Brittany than to protect peace for you. The room went quiet again. But this silence was different. Less staged. More honest. Alan closed his briefcase. I will file the notices Monday morning, he said. Until then, Mrs. Ellis, do not sign anything. And if anyone comes to the property without permission, call me. Helen squeezed my shoulder as she left. Aunt Linda hugged me carefully and whispered, Robert would be proud. I did not answer because the thought of Robert in that moment was too tender to touch. When everyone was gone except Daniel, I walked to the mantel and picked up the white ceramic vase Brittany had left there days earlier. I handed it to him. Take this with you. He looked down at it. Mom, I can throw it away. No, I said. Give it back to your wife. I am done storing things that were meant to replace me. He nodded and carried it to the door like something fragile and embarrassing. Before leaving, he turned back. Can I come by tomorrow? I looked at my son, the man I loved and no longer trusted completely. Call first, I said. He accepted that. After he left, I locked the door. Not because I was afraid. Because it was mine. Monday morning, Alan Porter filed the notices, and by noon I had copies in my email and a paper set in my mailbox. The language was formal, almost plain enough to seem harmless, but I read every sentence like it was a board being nailed back into the walls of my life. No unauthorized entry. No property discussion without my written approval. No real estate consultations on my behalf. No financial authority without independent legal review. I placed one copy in Robert's desk, one in the kitchen drawer, and one in the safe he had bolted to the floor of the hall closet 30 years earlier after a string of burglaries in the neighborhood. That afternoon, a locksmith came and changed the garage keypad, the front lock, and the back door deadbolt. He asked how many spare keys I wanted. I thought about the ceramic frog by the porch where we used to hide one for Daniel when he was in high school. I thought about Brittany letting herself in with coffee in her hand and ownership in her voice. 2, I said. 1 for me, and 1 sealed for my attorney. The locksmith nodded and did not ask questions. Sometimes strangers understand boundaries faster than family. Daniel called that evening. He did not come over. He called first. That mattered more than he knew. His voice sounded tired but clearer. Mom, I wanted to let you know I am staying at a hotel for a few nights. I closed my eyes for a moment. I am sorry it has come to that. I am sorry I let it come to this, he said. There was a difference and I heard it. We talked for 11 minutes. Not about Brittany. Not about the trust. Mostly about whether he had eaten, and whether the roads were icy near the Beltline. Motherhood does not vanish because trust has been damaged. It simply learns to stand farther back. Over the next several weeks, I put the house back together one object at a time. Robert's reading chair came up from the basement first. Daniel carried it himself on a Saturday morning after calling to ask if he could help. He placed it by the front window, then stood there with his hands at his sides, looking at the worn arms and the faded cushion. I remember Dad sitting there during snowstorms, he said. He would say the plow drivers were the real heroes of Wisconsin. I smiled because Robert had said exactly that every winter. We returned the blue china to the dining room cabinet. We hung the lace curtains again. I unpacked Emma's ceramic robin and set it on the small table near the stairs. When Daniel found the box Brittany had labeled donate, he went very quiet. I saw the box, he said. I just did not look inside. That is what you will have to live with, I said. He nodded. He did not ask me to soften it. Brittany did not apologize. She sent one email through Daniel saying she felt misunderstood, and that everyone had overreacted to her effort to help. Alan told me not to answer, so I did not. Silence can be a boundary when it is chosen instead of endured. Caroline Meyer sent a short written apology and confirmed she had deleted all photographs of the property. Lakeview Commons removed my name from their contact list. Aunt Linda began calling every Sunday after church. The first few calls were awkward, full of pauses and careful weather reports, but eventually she admitted she had repeated things Brittany told her because it was easier than asking me if they were true. I told her ease had done a lot of damage in our family. She said she knew. In April, the snow finally pulled back from the yard, leaving wet grass and flattened leaves. Helen came over with gardening gloves and 2 hydrangea plants from the nursery on Mineral Point Road. Your front porch looks too serious, she said. We planted them beneath the living room window, right where Robert once said blue flowers made the whole house look friendlier. My niece complained. Helen complained louder. We laughed like women who had earned the right to make noise in our own lives. Later that evening, I sat in Robert's chair with a cup of tea and listened to the brass clock ticking in the hallway. Daniel had started visiting once a week by appointment, usually alone. Sometimes he brought Emma and his son, and I let the children measure themselves on the pantry door frame beneath his old pencil marks. The first time Emma asked why her name was not there yet, I handed her a pencil and said, "Because we were waiting for you." Daniel turned away then, pretending to study the window, but I saw him wipe his eyes. I still loved my son. Love was never the question. Trust was. And trust, unlike blood, has to be rebuilt by hand. As for Brittany, she became quieter in the family because her favorite tool had been taken from her. She could no longer speak for me. She could no longer arrange my rooms, my future, or my reputation. She could stand outside the boundaries and dislike them. That was her right. Keeping them was mine. On the first warm night of May, I opened the front door and stood on the porch while the new hydrangeas moved gently in the breeze. The porch light glowed above me. The locks were new. The old clock was ticking. My wedding photo sat on the mantel where it belonged. For months, I had waited for someone in my family to remember that I was not a visitor in the life I built. In the end, I had to remember it first. That night, I sat in my living room under Robert's old clock, and for the first time in months, I did not feel like a guest in my own house.